Hey guys, what's going on? It's me, Jay. I wanted to talk a little bit about this anthology series that I saw yesterday called Them. It's an anthology series on Amazon Prime. I know I'm mad late when it comes to this because it's been out, but I just came across this yesterday. And I watched the whole thing from beginning to end, and I gotta say it was a tremendously heart wrenching series. It was kind of scary, some of the supernatural stuff that happens in the latter part of it, but the real part of it that got to me was here's the background of it. It's set in the 1950s. This family, the Emery family, moves into the all white neighborhood of Compton. Now, from what I know about Compton history, this is absolutely true, and it's true about a lot of neighborhoods in the 1950s. As the movie explains, after World War II, many African Americans, to escape the horror of Jim Crow, they moved from the South to places in the West and places in the North and places in the Midwest. And Compton was one of those places. And from what I know about Compton history, this is absolutely true. This is what happened. Specifically with Compton, it was a white neighborhood, a racist neighborhood, and you see this in the movie. The family experiences tremendous trauma as they try to settle in this neighborhood. The neighbors come out, they start playing loud music, they leave um, dead black figurines on them. They burn their lawn and they put racial slurs on their lawn. They try everything they can to basically scare this family and chase this family out of the neighborhood because they just don't want them there. And the wife later sees an agreement that the people in the neighborhood association of whatever the racist white people made to keep black families out of the neighborhood. And that was a historic practice back then in those days on something called redlining, which neighborhoods and banks they wouldn't loan to black families so that black families could not buy um, property or homes or own property or homes. So while at the same time after World War II, a lot of white families were moving out of the urban areas to settle in the suburbs, black families, because of racism and discrimination, couldn't do the same thing. They're prevented from doing that by uh, the white people, and that's what this movie really shows, and how Compton was way different because that's what really caught me off guard. In a sense, was like I had known a little bit about again I can I know a little bit about Compton history, so I knew this was true. That there was groups in Compton, gangs in Compton, white gangs in Compton, that were known as quote unquote spook hunters, that would hunt down black families that were trying to settle in that area. So that was something I knew, but I didn't know to the extent that they actually had agreements, physical agreements in a state like California to where black families couldn't settle. So anyway, this family travels from North Carolina to California. And at first, the daughter in the family, she says, well, why can't they settle in Watts? Because Watts was already settled by black families in the 20s. But the father, he wants something a little bit more upscale, so he decides to settle in Compton. And eventually, the wife begins to disagree with him because of what the neighbors are doing. The neighbors are just crazy neighbors, especially this one neighbor named Betty. She, she's just she's trying everything she can to just you know chase this family out of the neighborhood. I mean, from the very day she this family rolls onto the block, she's playing these really racist, you know, songs about the Congo, about the jungle, and she's having a husband who is gay come out and basically call these people, all kind of derogatory names. But then later, we find out that the town that they're in is not just an ordinary town, that is actually haunted by ghosts. And that there was a man in the 1800s who made a pact with the devil to keep black families out of there. So it wasn't just like, racism and discrimination, it takes on a supernatural element. And the devil actually dwells within their basement and appears to each family member as something that they would want and something that they would desire. The little girl, played by Melanie Hurd, who plays the part of Kevin Hart's daughter in Fatherhood. Again, she's just tremendous in this. She has the devil appear to her in the form of the teacher, Miss Vera, that she reads this book, Miss Vera's Tales, and the teacher appears to her as the incarnation of the devil. And the mother has the ghost of her dead son, because her son, one of the things that prompted them to move from North Carolina to California was that her son was basically, her baby son, her infant son, was killed by the KKK when the father wasn't there. So the devil is actually playing tricks on her, having her envision that the son is still alive. You know what I mean? Like, she sees the son appear to her in various dreams and various visions, and the devil that dwells within this house and in this neighborhood actually manifests to the mother in her fantasies and in her dreams. And with the father, he's haunted by the ghost of this man in blackface, which again symbolizes how prominent blackface was in the early 20s and 30s, in first vaudeville and then in Hollywood. Like, for example, Al Jolson, who became famous for his portrayal of blackface characters in The Jazz Singer, 1927. The first movie with talkies, the movie that had sound, was Al Jolson playing a black jazz singer, denouncing his Jewish heritage and becoming a black jazz singer. And of course, Jim Crow was based on a minstrel show as well. You know what I mean? So the father has the devil appear to him in the physicalized form of Jim Crow, where the the vaudevillian or the clown or whatever is joking around and prompting him to do all this violent stuff to all these white people and actually prove to them or confirm to them the stereotypes that they have about black people to them, like, act out on it and do all kinds of violent shit to them, so they could be like, well, you know what, see, that's why we didn't want black people in the neighborhood. You know what I mean? So this embodiment, this physical embodiment of Jim Crow is actually haunting the husband. um and with the teenage girl, it brings up certain white standards to beauty, because when she goes to this all white school in um this goes to this all white school, she sees all these cheerleaders that are all white, and then she begins to feel herself, too dark, too ugly, and unattractive. So it brings to light a lot of the self-esteem issues that a lot of people face as a result of white supremacy. So eventually, she actually, in the end of it, she actually paints herself white. The devil gets in her mind so much that she paints herself white, and she starts to dance in front of the bonfire, in front of the whole school, basically making a fool of herself. But are um, none of these actions are something that they want to do consciously. It's just that the devil gets into their minds. So I think each of the things that they go through is like a manifestation of what black people actually go through under the system of white supremacy. And on the one hand, you have um, the father who struggles to be a father and struggles to be a provider and a protector, but he couldn't be a provider and a protector at the time when his son died. He couldn't protect his family from the KKK. So, in a sense, he struggles with that emasculation. The mother also feels like she couldn't be a mother and she couldn't really protect her family from the tragedy that she went through, or had to endure, because she was also living under the oppression of white supremacy. And then with the daughter, you have the psychological effects of white supremacy that are related to beauty and attractiveness. How they told black people for years, through the media and through pictures and through magazines and stuff, that they weren't attractive, that they weren't good enough, especially black women that had to endure under the system of the white standard of beauty. And with the little girl, you have another anti-black racist trope that is a product of white supremacy. The idea that black children or black kids are not smart enough, or they're not good enough or successful in school, and how racist school teachers indoctrinate and brainwash kids to believe that they aren't good enough or they aren't successful enough in school. You know what I mean? So each each family member endures a different side of white supremacy through the incarnation of the devil. The devil is white supremacy, and the devil is is manifesting in their minds, making them act crazy, and showing you how the psychological and the physical effects that oppression, racism, and white supremacy has on people. You know, they can not only result in physical violence, but psychological and mental violence as well. And that's what exactly happens to this family. Sure, it takes on supernatural elements that I feel like they had to do that because, I mean, just simply showing, you know, a real life historical setting of a World War II veteran. He moves into a well-to-do neighborhood, and his racist white neighbors don't want him there. That's a cliche story, but they use these supernatural elements to show you the level of effects that it has on them. You know what I'm saying? How this guy, this father, is like when he goes into the neighborhood, he is so dove-like. He is so peaceful. He is so accommodating to all these people that are just downright rotten to him. You know what I mean? Like just like the racist lady's husband actually calls him an ape to his face. You know what I mean? And he does nothing. He just holds it in. But eventually, it's like so much of the pressure was put on him that what can he finally do? And there's this one scene where he's in the movie theater and the Jim Crow character, the blackface character, is yelling at him, beast of the field, beast of the field, beast of the field. And he's just pounding his chest, and he just can't take it no more. You know, he just has to let it all out. Same thing with the mother. She comes in, she's so accommodating, and she's polite to them and everything. She even goes up to the racist white lady and tries to make peace with her. But towards the end, it's like, okay, I can't take this shit no more. They even kill the dog, and when they kill the dog, she comes out on the lawn with him pointing at everybody, and the first thing they say is, "Look, see, I told you they couldn't be controlled. I told you they're violent. I told you they have violent impulses," and basically makes her look bad. I mean, one incident, she's out there doing the laundry, and one of the white kids, pees on her sheets, and then she chases him away with a stick. And then other people are like, "Well, look at her. She's violent. She's ghetto. She's chasing him away with that stick." She's gonna harm the kids. you know. So they begin to feed it. They begin to um the stereotypes about them begin to become their reality because eventually they just can't take this shit no more. Like it's so much pressure put on them, trying to fit in, trying their best to do the best they can. That it's just breaking them down mentally and physically. You know what I mean? What they um, I'm getting to that, Lisa. What they what they what they go through is just too much. Uh, too much psychologically. Like the psychological torture that they go through is just unbearable. Would I say that it's a knockoff of Us? That's what I was gonna mention. It does have the same girl that's in Us. Um, Shahadi Wright Joseph. She's also she plays the part of Abilene in Us, and she plays the part of the daughter in this. Would I say that it is a knockoff of Us? Kind of, it is. It's kind of reminiscent of Us, but Us was more to me about classism than racism. I mean, there was some elements of a commentary on racism in Us, but it was more about classism because remember, in Us, there was the upper tier of society that were living in the upper part of the world, the higher class of the world, if you will, and the people that were living in the underclass of the world. So that was kind of like a two-tier society, kind of like Elysium, right? And it was more based on class. It wasn't necessarily based on any racial commentary. It was more of a class-based commentary. So that's why it goes to us in terms of looking at the class divisions between us as people of color, as minorities in a group, whereas them is looking from the outside, from not the inside about internal conflicts, but from the outside about external conflicts between blacks and whites and white oppression of black people, both in the 1950s and in 2021. Honestly, you know what I mean. So whereas um, Red becomes Abilene, and then Red and Abilene switch places at the carnival in Us, and then Red continues to live in the upper world, whereas Abilene continues to live in the lower world. And there's these two-tier worlds in Us. There's not that in them. Them is more of a take on real life history and what really went on, more so than Us. Us is more metaphorical. Them is more, I don't know, historical fiction in a sense, because the conflicts, the events depicted in them, drew from real life. They really happened. They didn't happen with the psychological stuff necessarily, but I mean, with the supernatural stuff necessarily, of course not. But they really happened in terms of how black people were really treated during the first and second migration from the south to the west coast and east. You know what I mean? So it's taken real life history and putting a psychological spin and a horror spin on it. Whereas Us is not doing that. Us is commenting on social stratification in modern society, but from an internal level, looking inward than rather than looking outward. So I hope that answer your question, Lisa, of how I believe it's different. You know what I mean? Because to me, the lower stratum of society, the tethered in Us, was not based on race. It was more based on class. This is more this is more commentary on racial discrimination, but with the psychological and physical traumas of racism personified in the devil. You know what I mean? How Hollywood depicted black folks with the Jim Crow character. How the model magazines that girls like the teenage girl likes, depicted black women, and how the pressures of manhood and the pressures of motherhood. Um, Next movie is gonna be called We. Well, yeah, that would be something, but that would I would think that would we would explore dynamics among males and females probably. Um, in a context of marginalized groups, specifically black people, and um, how the pressures of racism and white supremacy put a bearing on male and female relations within the black community. That would be interesting, and that could be called We. I mean, yeah, there are a lot of ones that do that already. You know what I mean? But they do it in a more comical sense. What I um, what I was telling Lisa, and I was telling it to my mom, I feel like this new horror is making a return, but unlike the horror that we saw in the 1980s with the slasher films like Freddy and Chucky and Jason and all that. This is not just like one guy becomes a monster and then he kills a bunch of people off. These sort of black themed horror movies deal with sociological issues mixed in with horror. They use horror as a way to comment on society, whereas other horror movies in the past really didn't do that. I mean, Twilight Zone did. Twilight Zone was known for that because the guy who created Twilight Zone was a social liberal, and he would use horror as a metaphor to um to explain, use it as a way to comment on society. But in the 80s, horror movies, in the 90s, horror movies didn't really do that. Horror movies were just about making you scared, and that was it. You had to go to science fiction all the time. Movies like Star Wars, movies like Star Trek, other science fiction movies, in order to see metaphors for comments on society, comments on history, and comments on psychology. They never really used horror as a tool for that. But now, in these black horror movies, they're making you think. They're personifying the the evil guy or monster or the boogeyman, if you will, of society into a scary thing. So it's not only making you scared, but like Lisa saying, it's making you think, which is different for a horror movie because horror movies never never did that before. Not really. Freddy Krueger wasn't. I mean, yes, he was personified as kids' nightmares and stuff, and that was the deepest they got. But then, towards the end of Freddy Krueger, towards the end of the series in Freddy Krueger, he just became a comedy star, a comedy guy. He would just say funny shit, and then he would kill people in a funny way. These movies are not like Us, Them, Get Out. These are different. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm loving it. You know what I mean? Um, this is an anthology series, so I don't think the next season of them will be dealing with the Emery family, but perhaps they'll be dealing with a different family in a different context, in a explaining racism in a different something different, a different family, just like American Horror Story tells different stories, but they're all loosely connected in some kind of way. They're not all the same. It doesn't all deal with the same family. The Emerys, you know, their story was what their story was ended. You know, the story of how Compton underwent that transformation from what it was to, you know, what it eventually became, uh, um, was told in that. You know, what I mean, how, and it really educated a lot of people because they think of Compton, they think of like rap music or the home of the Bloods and Crips where they started. But there was a whole history as to why the Bloods and Crips started in the first place. You know what I mean? They started the Crips and the Bloods, specifically the Crips, to protect um, black families moving in there from racist white attacks. That's why the whole organization started in the first place. You know what I mean? And eventually it morphed into something else when they got drugs and shit involved in the 80s. You know what I mean? But that's why. That's why it became a gang haven because it was always dangerous. But at one point, it was dangerous for a racial reason more than a crime reason. And these gangs existed for a reason. You know, all gangs technically have their origins in resistance against bullying, resistance against racial or ethnic discrimination. You know, gangs just don't form because they want to. A lot of times they form because new groups move in and new groups are teased, picked on, or whatever. So they feel like strength is in numbers, so they form groups to protect themselves. Yeah. So as far as this show, them, I recommend this show, but I will warn you guys that if you are easily scared or if you're not going to really pick up on a lot of these clues, you got to really pay close attention because it's really two parallel stories going on. There's the parallel story of this family facing racial discrimination, and then it's a supernatural parallel of this house. Um, some of the people that star in it, um, Deborah Ariende stars as the mother, Lucky, and Ashley Thomas stars as the father, Emery. And he's based on a real guy. He's based on a real doctor. They joke around. He's an engineer in the movie, but they joke around a lot that he is a doctor because part of the reason why they hate on him, besides hating on him because he's black, they hate on him because he has more money than a lot of the white guys there, and he has a happier family than a lot of the white people there. The one lady, that's the real racist lady. She's unable to have kids because her father molested her when she was little. You know what I mean? So she's unable to have kids. So one of the reasons why she hates the black family is because she can't have kids, and that's a comment on low white fertility rates. I mean, if you look now in 2021, and even back then, they were scared of demographic shift in neighborhoods and in countries even because white birth rates are lower and black birth rates and brown birth rates are higher. You know what I mean? So that it was like Public Enemy said, fear of a black planet, you know? So this lady is symbolic of low white fertility rates and the fear of low white fertility rates among white women. And she's basically a Karen, you know, but I'm not going to give away what happens to her, but let's just say she gets her comeuppance. Her place as a woman in the 50s, she put in her place as a woman in the 50s. And it doesn't let us forget that although she is white privileged, men in her society still have privilege over her in that time period. So Yeah, it is. It is, Lisa, and um it presents Compton as this idyllic place. Like, remember the neighborhood from Edward Scissorhand where it was like Pleasantville type shit. Like, it was on the set, like the set Leave It to Beaver. How we imagine in America, how the racists imagine, like make America great again, people, how they imagine America was in the 50s. You know, when they first move into this neighborhood, that's how this kind of is. You know what I mean? She's like, the racist woman is like June Cleaver, the father is like Ward. You know what I mean? All the guys have slicked back hair, greased hair, and their pant legs rolled up and everything, and it just looks like some kind of shit out of a TV show. You know what I mean? Which, the racism aside, just that alone would make me scared. You know what I mean? Like, people go around and they talk like this. They go like, "How you doing, sir?" Like, "Howdy, neighbor," and all, all that shit. They have a milkman. you know, you know, you, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? All the women have these poofed out dresses and these beehive haircuts, and the men have all this slick back hair, and they look like greaser gangs from the 50s. Everything we imagine the 50s kind of was. You know what I mean? Like, basically, like I said, Leave It to Beaver or Father Knows Best type shit. You know what I mean? Like, the kind of America, like I said, that. Right. Lisa said that there's a name of milkman, and people talk like that, then some messed up, spooky stuff is gonna be going. Yeah, basically the kind of neighborhood that people like Ben Shapiro want or imagine that the world that the world was a better place when people talk like that, dressed like that, acted like that, and women acted like that, and they were all housewives, and they were all concerned for their, oh, there's this one scene where they can't eat. They're eating pie, right? They're discussing what to do with the black neighbors, and they're eating pie. And the woman goes, "Oh, I can't eat no pie because it'll go straight to my hips." So all the women are concerned about their self-image, in a sense, and they're all into this vanity stuff. And they're all like housewives. None of them have jobs. It's completely some Pleasantville shit. Like, it just, I don't know, strange. Like, you know what I mean? Like, women are just the women's the comment. Oh, and one of the husbands is actually cheating on his wife with a man. So one of the guys is gay too. So it's kind of a commentary on how LGBT people were kept in the closet too in the 50s. So it's not just a racial thing; it's also a gay thing. So, and and the fact that it's Compton is like, wow, Compton needs to look like that. But I'm sure, like Lisa said, beneath the surface, and that's when you start to see beneath the surface, these people are all screwed up. They have some of the same problems we have. In the modern era, family dysfunction. One of the ladies does drugs. One of the ladies is an alcoholic. You know, one of the lady's husbands is gay on the low. The lady can't have no children. Another another guy's husband, another woman's husband beats the crap out of her. So it's you begin to see through the eyes of the protagonist, this family, the screwed up nature of 1950s America. What the conservatives want to come back, which I hope will never come back. You know what I mean? They see it through rose-colored glasses because America on the world stage back then in the 50s was emerging out of World War II, the most powerful nation on earth, and all the all the factories was low. Guys like this, like the father, the black father, he works as an engineer. They work in the factories. All the factories were here in America. All these guys had really good jobs. They drove really nice cars and shit. But and America was doing good economics wise, in the 50s. But social wise, how people with disabilities were treated, how racial minorities were treated, how LGBT people were treated, and how women were treated was terrible. And that this movie shows that. So the them could be them in a racial sense, or it could be them in LGBT sense with the husband, or it could be them women, or it could be them, foreigners. There's this guy, one guy that's a Nazi, undercover Nazi, and he has a bunker underneath his ground. So them takes on many contexts. But I loved it, man. It really hit a lot of points with me, and it was funny too because I was telling a friend how California transformed politically because California used to be a Republican state. It was completely a Republican state in the 50s. During the time this show takes place, like that's when Ronald Reagan was the governor, and that's when people were allowed to have guns in California. Second Amendment rights were big in California before the Mulford Act, which the Panthers were protesting when they walked into the courthouse. So it was a different society, California, than what it is now. But I liked it, the commentary on 1950s society through horror. Anyway, peace. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And hit the bell button to see when my next video is coming out. Love y'all.